Hey guys, in this video the brilliant Miss B is going to be taking you through working calculations direct proportion. Now we need this skill in maths, we also need it in science and geography and a few other subjects, so it's a really important one to get right. There are 15 different examples here, worked through at 3 different levels, and you can use this video however you want to. Go through it as quickly or as slowly depending on how confident you feel. And then once you've done that, there are loads more examples just waiting for you over my website.
Have a look at direct proportion. So when you see either the words direct proportional or directly proportional, or you see this symbol here, which means proportional, so you might have something like x is proportional to y, then what that means is you can express this relationship using an equation, y equals kx. And when we say that y and x are proportional to each other, what we mean is that x is being multiplied by something. It's going to be a multiple of y. So it's all about that k, and the k tells you just how proportional they are. For example, if k is 2, then x is going to be double the size of y. So the first thing to do with questions like this is to figure out what exactly the equation is, and you'll always be given a couple of clues. So in question 1, our clues are that x is 2 and y is 6. And these values are happening at the same time. So in the equation, we can swap y with 6 and we can swap x with 2. And just remember, in algebra, if you've got two letters next to each other, they are being multiplied together. So when x is 2 and y is 6, that means that k would have to be a 3, and that would give you 3 times 2 is 6. So now we know that k is 3, we can now write the full equation. So y equals 3x. So when we say that y and x are proportional to each other, x is going to be 3 times larger than y. Now we've found the equation, we have a follow-up question, and it's saying what is y when x is 10? So we're not saying that x is always 2 and y is always 6. X and y's values can change, and so if x changed to 10, then we need to swap the x with a 10. So we can write out the equation, y equals 3, and remember, in algebra, when two things next to each other, they're being multiplied, so y is 3 times 10, which is 30. And again, one last time, it's really important just to mention that the values of x and y can change. So when x is 2, y will be 6, but if x raised to 10, then y would also raise to be 30. The common thing here is that x and y are always 3 apart. They've been multiplied or divided by 3 to get between the two. Now, before I move on, I'm just going to make it super clear what my answer is. There's quite a lot of work out there. So my answer is going to be that y equals 30. So let's try the same method with question 2. So again, x is proportional to y. So we're going to use the equation y equals kx. And we're told that x is 8 and y is 4. So we want to replace those numbers. So instead of writing y, I'm going to write 4. We've got the k. And instead of writing x, I'm going to write 8. Again, remember that's a multiplication. So 4 equals k multiplied by 8. So what can you multiply 8 by to get 4? So it's going to have to be something that's less than 1. And a half of 8 would give you 4. So k is going to be 1 half. A half times 8 is 4. So now we can write down the equation. So we know that y and x can always change value, but k, that stands for a constant. That's always going to be the same. So it's y equals half of x. K is 1 half. So now for our follow-up question, we're being told that y is 32, so we can substitute. So we'll swap y with 32. 32 is the same as half of x. And then if 32 is half the size of x, then x must be twice as big. So x would be 64. And again, we're very clear with my answer. I'm going to write down that x equals 64. And by the way, I've done a lot of those calculations in my head using a bit of logic, but you can also use the balancing method for solving equations. So when you have 32 equals half of x, then you could say, well, what's the opposite of a half? That would be times it by 2. Do the same thing to both sides and just use solving equation skills. let's try question 3 now. So again, x is proportional to y, therefore y equals kx. So we're saying that y is 25, then we'll have that constant number that we don't know yet, and we're going to multiply it by x, which is 30. So the constant, again, we're just solving equation skills here. I want the constant on its own, k. It's with a times 30, so we're going to divide by 30. Divide both sides by 30. We're going to get 25 over 30. That's quite a complicated fraction, so let's try and simplify it. I can see that I can divide this fraction by 5, so 25 divided by 5 is 5, and 30 divided by 5 is 6. So we have a fraction. So now we can write out our full equation. So we know that usually y and x can change values. The constant is 5/6, and we have x. So let's substitute for the follow-up question. What is x when y equals 5? So that would give us 5/6 of x. Now again, we can use our solving equation skills. So 5/6 of x, let's multiply both sides by 6. 5 times 6 would give us 30, and 5/6 times 6 would cancel out, so 30 equals 5x. And then let's divide both sides by 5. So 30 divided by 5 is 6, and 5x divided by x. So again, just our simple solving equation skills, and we can now see that x equals 6. Now you can see this question was a little bit more complicated, so you can be very confident with solving equations and working with solving equations. So go and watch the videos on solving equations if you're not too sure. Moving on to question 4. So we have our clues. X is 42 and y is 28. Let's substitute those into the basic equation. So we would have 28 equals k times 42. So we divide both sides by 42. That would give us k equals 28 divided by 42. Now again, quite simplify that fraction. We could start off by dividing by 2, but I think I can spot that both those numbers are in the 7 times table. So let's divide by 7. 28 divided by 7 is 4, and 42 divided by 7 is 6. And those are both even, so we can simplify again. Let's divide that by 2, and that will give us 2/3. Now we can set up the full equation. Y equals 2/3 of x. So now we have the equation. Let's do the follow-up question. What is y when x equals 6? So let's swap x with a 6. So y equals 2/3 of 6. So 2/3 of 6, well 1/3 of 6 would be dividing 6 by 3, which would be 2. So 2/3 of 6 would be 4. Be a bit careful with that, just kind of think about, well 1/3 is 2, 2/3 is 4, and 3/3 would be 6, which makes sense. So our answer, y equals 4. And again, you'll notice we've got other topics creeping in. We've got equivalent fractions, we're finding fractions of a number. So again, before you watch this video all the way through, just make sure you're super confident with your fractions as well, and you've looked at the fractions videos. So now let's do this one last time for the final question. So we've got 32 for y. We're trying to find out what k is, and that's being multiplied by x, which is 48. So let's get k on its own and divide both sides by 48. That would give us that k equals 32 divided by 48. Now both those numbers are in the 8 times table. So now you could divide by 2 quite a few times, have quite a lot of simplifications, but we're going to try and use the largest numbers first. So 48 is 6/8, and 32 is 4/8, and again we can simplify that to 2/3. So it looks like this question has got the same equation as the previous question. Y is 2/3 of x. So when we look at our follow-up question, what is y when x is 6? Well, it's the same equation, it's going to have the same answer, and y is going to be 4 when x is 6. Moving on to the medium questions. Now again, I'm going to follow a similar process. So if x is proportional to y, then we're going to use the equation y equals x, but just make sure that this is being scaled somewhat. So we want y equals kx, which would mean that the values of y and x are usually going to be different. Now these questions are only looking for the equation. So for the first question, as a bit of a recap, we're going to swap y and x are two clues into the equation. So y is 4, swap the y with a 4. X is 5, swap the x with a 5. Equal sign in the same place, the k in the same place. And remember, in algebra, two things next to each other are being multiplied. So we've got 4 equals k times 5. Now we need to find out what k is. So we can use our solving equation skills. We want k on its own, do the opposite of the thing with it. So rather than doing times 5, we're going to divide both sides by 5. That would give us 4/5 equals k. So now we can write down our final equation, and we're just going to swap the k with what we found. So y equals 4/5 of x. And there's no x or y values to find because those are going to change. Those could be any kind of value. All that we care about is we're showing that the y and the x are linked together by the 4/5 value. X will always be 4/5 of the size of y. So far, looks exactly the same as what we did in the easy questions, but with a step missing. So what's different about the medium questions? So you'll notice in question 2 that x is not proportional to y. X is proportional to y squared. So I'm just going to add that to my key at the top to put in the y squared. That means with our equation, it won't be y equals kx, it'll be y squared equals kx. And once we figure that out, we're going to substitute as normal. So we know that y is 2, but that y is being squared, so we need to write 2 squared. Then we've got the k, as usual, being multiplied by the x, which is 16. And again, we're going to use our solving equation skills to work out what k is. Now, the first step I'll do here is that 2 squared is 4. So 4 equals k times 16, and then we want to divide both sides by 16. So k equals, and we can simplify that because both those numbers are in the 4 times table. So 4 divided by 4 is 1, and 16 divided by 4 is 4. So k is a quarter. So now we can substitute k into our equation. So y squared is a quarter of x. Now you might want to do one final step here. Now this should be fine for expressing the relationship using an equation, but you might be asked to express it as just y equals rather than y squared equals. And all our previous answers have been just y equals. So we use some more solving equation skills. We have y squared, want y on its own. What's the opposite of a squared? It's a square root. We're going to square root both sides. That would give us that y equals the square root of the other side of the equation, which is a quarter of x. Now again, either of those answers in blue should be fine for what we've been asked in these questions, but you might be asked to represent your answer in a certain format, so this is how you would present it as a y equals. Moving on to question 3, again, x is proportional to y squared, so we'll follow the same steps. So instead of writing y, I'm going to write 3, and that's 3 squared, so I could just write 9 straight away and save a bit of time. And then we have the k, and I'm multiplying by x, which is 27. You use your solving equation skills now. So k is going to be, if you want it on its own, it's been times by 27, so we have to divide by 27. That'll give us 9 over 27. Both those numbers are in the 9 times table. Let's simplify. 9 divided by 9 is 1, and 27 divided by 9 is 3. So k is a third. So now we can substitute in. So y squared equals 1/3 of x. Just substituting in the k for a third. And then if we did want to have this as a y equals like the previous question, then we want to square root both sides to get y on its own. So the final answer could be y equals 1/3 of x. Moving on to question 4, things change a bit again. This time x is equivalent to y cubed. So I'm going to update my key at the top. I'm going to get rid of the squared symbols and I'm going to replace them with cube symbols. X is equivalent to y cubed. So y cubed equals kx. So now we'll follow the same steps. So we're going to swap y with 4, remembering that it is going to be cubed. So we're going to write down 4 cubed equals k times x, which is 48. Now we can work out 4 cubed, so that would be 4 times 4, and 16 times 4 would give us 64. So 64 is the same as k times 48. So let's get k on its own. Now k is being multiplied by 48, so let's divide by 48 on both sides. K would be 64 divided by 48. And we want to simplify this. Now I think both of those numbers are going to be in the 8 times table. 64 divided by 8 is 8, and 48 divided by 8 is 6. For those are even, so let's divide them by 2, so that'll give us 4 over 3. So now let's write out our equation by substituting. So y cubed is going to be the same as 4/3. And then again, we want this to be y equals, then we've got to do the opposite of the cubing the y, which would be a cube root. So we could have, as a final answer, if we're asked for it, y equals the cube root of 4/3 x. And for cube root, just write a 3 on the root sign to distinguish between a cube root and the square roots we had in the previous questions. Alternatively, the 4/3, if you want to write that as 1 and 1/3, convert it into a mixed number, that's absolutely fine as well, but this answer should be fine. Moving on to the final question, you'll see that we've got a square root now over the y. X is proportional to the square root of y. So I'm going to rewrite my key again. Instead of writing y cubed, I'm going to write the square root of y. So x is proportional to the square root of y. Therefore, the square root of y equals kx. Let's substitute. So y is 16. So the square root of 16 would be equal to k multiplied by x, and x is 3. First step now is that the root of 16 would be 4. So 4 equals k times 3. Now to simplify this, to get x on its own, k on its own, we're going to divide both sides by 3. So that would give us that k equals 4/3. So now we can substitute into our equation. Root y is equal to 4/3 of x. And then one last time, if we want y equals on its own, the opposite of rooting is squaring. So we're going to square both sides. So y would equals the square of 4/3 of x. So I'm just going to put 4/3 of x in a bracket and then put the squared symbol on the outside of the bracket. There's our answer. Now, moving on to the hard questions, we're going to do exactly the same thing we did with the medium questions and find an equation, but then we're going to bring in the follow-up questions like we had with the easy questions and do a little bit extra at the end. I'm going to try and skip a few steps now with the working out, so we should be a little bit more confident. So, question 1, x is proportional to y squared. I'll look at my key, and I'm going to go with y squared equals kx for my equation, and I'm going to substitute in. So y is 3, so y squared would be 9. So I'm going straight to the answer for that, skip a step. And then we've got k times, and then x is 18. So something times 18 is 9. It looks like that k is going to be a half. Half of 18 is 9. So now I can write out the equation. Y squared is a half the size of x. And we have our follow-up question. What is x when y equals 8? So let's substitute y in. So if y is 8, y squared would be 64. So we're saying that 64 is half the size of x. That means that x would have to be the opposite. That'll be twice as big. So x is going to be 128. Given we've got so much working out, let's make it very clear that my answer is 128. Now, question 2 follows the same format. X is proportional to y squared. So let's do the same thing. So y is 4. So y squared would be 16. 16 equals k times, and then x is 32. Now, again, it looks like k is going to be a half again. A half of 32 is 16. This is going to have the same equation. Y squared is half of x. Let's do a substitution for the follow-up question. So what is x when y equals 6? So if y is 6, y squared would be 36, saying that 36 is half the size of x. So opposite way, x will be double the size. So it looks like x is going to be double 36, 2. Moving on to question 3. Now we have x is proportional to y cubed, so I'm going to use equals kx as my equation. So let's substitute. So rather than writing y, we're going to write y equals 2, but it's going to be 2 cubed, so 2 times 2 times 2 would be 8. So 8 equals k times x, and x is 28. Now, I don't think I can do this one in my head, so let's divide both sides by 28 to get k on its own. So k equals 8 over 28. They're both in the 4 times table, so let's divide by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And 28 divided by 4, we can have it twice. Half of 28 is 14. Half of 14 is 7. So k is 2/7. So let's write out our equation. Y cubed is equal to 2/7 x. So let's look at our follow-up question. What is x when y equals 4? Well, if y is 4, then 4 cubed would be 4 times 4 times 4. So 4 times 4 is 16, and 16 times 4 would give us 64. So 64 is equal to of x. So let's use some solving equation skills here. So we've got 2/7, so let's times both sides by 7 first. Now I'm using a calculator for this, but on non-calculator paper you could use a column method. So 64 times 7 is 448, and that would be equal to 2x, because we got rid of the 7. Now we need to get rid of the 2. Now the over 7, the opposite of that times is just 8 times 2. The opposite of that is divide by 2. So we divide the 448 by 2. We'll get 224. So let's write down our final answer. X is equal to 224. Now, if you question, well, that's quite a large number, maybe I've made a mistake, just understand that cube numbers, they do get rather large rather quickly. For example, we saw that 2 cubed is 8, 4 cubed is 64. They do get quite large, so that's going to be okay as our answer. Question 4 is another x is proportional to y cubed, so let's substitute in. So if y is 4, then y cubed is going to be 64, and that's going to equal k times x, which is 112. So let's rearrange this to make x the k the subject. So let's divide by 112. So k is going to be 64 over 112. So let's simplify the fraction. So let's divide by 2 since they're both even. That will give us 32 over, then half of 100 is 5, 12 is 6, so that'll be 56. Both of those are still even, so let's divide by 2 again. 32 divided by 2 is 16. And then 56 divided by 2, so half of 50 is 25, half of 6 is 3, that will give us 28. Again, still even, we can divide by 2, so this will give us 8 over 14, and then 4 over 7. So our equation is going to be y cubed is equal to 4/7 of x. So then we can look at our follow-up question. What is x when y equals 2? So let's substitute 2 in for y, and it'll be y cubed, which is 8. So we're saying is equal to 4/7 of x. So we can multiply both sides by 7 to make x a subject. So that would give us 56 is 4x, and then we can divide the answer by 4 to get x on its own. So x is going to be 56 divided by 4 is 14. X equals 14 when y is 2. Now looking at the final question, x is equivalent to the root of y, so we'll use root y equals kx. So y is 4, so the root of y would be 2. So 2 equals kx, x is 3. Let's rearrange. So let's divide both sides by 3 to get k on its own. So k would be 2 divided by 3. And rather than working that out, we can just write 2/3. Let's write out the equation. So the root of y is equal to 2/3 of x. We can substitute in for a follow-up equation. So what is y when x equals 1? So we'll swap x with an 81. So that'll give us the root of y is equal to 2/3 of 81. 1. So if I want to find 1/3 of 81, I would divide it by 3. So 81 divided by 3 would give us 27. And then if I wanted 2/3, I'd have to multiply 27 by 2, which would give me 50. So the square root of y is 54. But I don't want the square root of y. What I want is a full y. So what I need to do now is square both sides. So I'm going to have to square 54. Now that would be 54 multiplied by 54. It's going to be quite a large number. I'm using a calculator. Again, it is possible to do a column multiplication for this if it's a non-calculator paper, although I think that's unlikely. And that should give you 2,916. So we can write down our final answer, y equals 2,960.
Ouch! This is why in some videos I have unexplained scratches.